Hi, my name is Brielle. My sister-in-law stood in my mother's kitchen, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "You still have a key to my house?" Then she called the police on me, accused me of breaking in. They came, they questioned, and when they read the deed out loud, she couldn't speak. But that moment, that wasn't the beginning. That was just the first time anyone else saw what I had known for years. That I'd been erased, slowly, carefully, from the very home I grew up in. They changed the locks. They sold my mother's wedding dress. They threw a memorial in her name and left me out of the program entirely. And now, I'm here to ask, what would you do if your own family tried to rewrite you out of your own story? There's something about a woman's voice, soft and sharp all at once, that can turn a Sunday into a memory you'll never unhear. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. I had a pan of baked mac and cheese, the good kind with 3 cheeses and crushed garlic croutons on top. I'd spent the better part of the afternoon making it for my brother Ellison. He'd always loved it since we were kids. And I figured I'd drop it off and stay for dinner like I usually did on Sundays. I pulled into the driveway of the house on East Henry Street just as the sun began to dip low, casting that soft orange glow over the magnolia trees Mama planted when we were little. The house had changed, of course. The porch had been painted gray, the hanging ferns replaced with minimalist lanterns. But it was still, technically, mine. Still holding the warm tray, I used the spare key I kept on my chain. Mama gave it to me back in 2009, said it was my responsibility after Daddy passed. The lock clicked open like it always did. But the moment the door creaked, I knew something was wrong. The music playing inside was loud, bass-heavy, and something smelled more like imported essential oil than home cooking. And then she appeared. Callista, tall, poised, holding a stemless wine glass like she'd just walked off a Pinterest board. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Brielle," she said, eyebrows raised, tone clipped. "You still have a key to my house?" It took me a second to process it. She didn't say our house, not even the house. She said I blinked. "Excuse me?" She shifted her weight, holding the glass tighter. "I mean, Ellison and I weren't expecting you. You didn't text." "I didn't think I had to. I just brought dinner. I always do on Sundays." That's something we're kind of rethinking. Boundaries, you know? Boundaries. I stood there, frozen, mac and cheese cooling in my arms. She didn't offer to take the dish, didn't invite me in. Just stood, perfectly still, in the middle of the living room I grew up in, acting like I was the intruder. I forced a smile, the kind that hurts your cheeks. "I'll just leave this here then," I said, stepping back out and placing the dish on the porch table. Callista didn't say a word. I walked back to my car. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. But my hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't even tell Ellison that night. I didn't want to make it worse. But something about that moment stayed lodged in me like a splinter under the skin. The next afternoon, I stopped by again, wanted to pick up an old photo album I'd left in the study. This time, the key didn't work. At first, I thought maybe the door was jammed. I tried again. Nothing. I tried the back door, also locked. I checked the lock itself. They'd changed it. No warning, no call, no note. And just when I was standing there, debating whether to knock or walk away, my phone buzzed. "Please don't come unannounced. It stresses the kids." Callista. They didn't even have kids. I stood on the porch for a full 2 minutes before turning around. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment with a stack of manila folders. I hadn't looked through them in years, but I knew exactly where to find the one that mattered. Original deed, 1987. My name, clear as day, signed over from Mama. I remembered the day she did it, said it was for safekeeping. I had a better head for numbers than Ellison, she said. Besides, I was the one who stayed behind after Daddy died, helped her keep the place from falling apart. Ellison had been in Chicago then, working IT. Callista was just someone we saw at Christmas. I placed the folder on the coffee table, got up, and poured myself some water. The apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. This wasn't about a key anymore. It wasn't even about a dish of food or a Sunday dinner. This was about being told, without anyone having to say it, that I no longer belonged in the home I helped preserve. It was about someone walking into the story halfway and trying to rewrite the beginning. Mama's voice echoed in my head from years ago. "This house is your safe space, Brielle. Protect it." I swallowed that memory like it was medicine, bittersweet and steadying. They'd changed the locks, sure, but they hadn't changed the deed, they hadn't changed the history, and they certainly hadn't changed me. I opened my laptop, scanned the deed, saved it to 3 folders, uploaded it to cloud storage, and emailed it to myself, just in case. Then I leaned back in my chair, hands crossed over my chest. "No one gets to lock me out of what's mine," I said out loud, "not even family. The funny part is, they never even asked whose name was on the deed. 2 weeks had passed since they changed the locks. 2 weeks since I stood on my own porch, reading a text message that implied I was a disturbance in a home I practically raised myself in. But this Sunday wasn't like the others. It was Mama's memorial. Callista had taken the liberty of planning it, sent out invitations, posted about it on her curated social media with tags like #FamilyMatriarch and #LegacyOfLove, each one more nauseating than the last. She called it a celebration of Maris Carter's life hosted by her loving son and daughter-in-law. No mention of me, not even once. Still, I came. I didn't show up to fight or make a scene. I wore a dark green dress Mama always liked on me, packed her favorite peach crumble, and tucked the old photo album into a tote bag. The one with Polaroids from birthdays, church picnics, Christmas mornings. The album Callista once described as a little too dated to display. The driveway was already lined with cars by the time I pulled in. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest. My heels clicked against the sidewalk like a countdown. When I stepped through the door, no key this time, just a knock and a wait. No one greeted me. The house was full, buzzing with voices and soft jazz in the background. Strangers smiled politely. Cousins nodded. Nobody looked surprised, but nobody looked comfortable either. The living room had been cleared out and replaced with folding chairs, trays of catered food, and a digital frame on the mantel cycling through photos of Mama. But as I looked closer, I realized all the pictures were ones I hadn't taken. The ones Callista liked, the presentable ones. Filtered, cropped, empty of context. Callista floated across the room like she owned the air itself. She spotted me and smiled. "We weren't sure you'd come," she said, voice light but sharp as glass. "I wasn't sure you'd remember she had a daughter," I replied. She blinked. The smile faltered but didn't fall. "Well, you're here now. Make yourself at home." I glanced around. There was nowhere to sit. Every chair was occupied. My own brother, Ellison, stood near the hallway, talking to one of our uncles. He made eye contact with me, just for a second, then looked away. I turned, found a quiet corner in the hallway by the staircase, and sat on the floor. Plate balanced on my knees, photo album beside me. I opened the program. Thick cardstock, floral border, elegant font. Hosted by Ellison Callista Carter. Under Children of Maris Carter, there was just one name, Ellison James Carter. My breath caught. They didn't just forget me, they erased me. I stared at the words like they were written in fire. I was her only daughter. The one who stayed behind when Daddy passed. The one who took her to her doctor appointments, cleaned her house, helped her fill out paperwork, bathed her when her knees gave out. But according to this program, I was never even there. An older cousin, Alma, shuffled past me and paused. She knelt slightly, resting a hand on my shoulder. "I saw your name wasn't listed," she whispered. "It's not right." I looked up at her, forcing a calm nod. "Thanks for noticing." She patted my hand, but that was it. No one said anything to Ellison. No one questioned Callista. Because in families like mine, silence wears a polite smile. As people filtered toward the dining room for the sit-down dinner, I followed slowly. I stood near the threshold, watching everyone take their seats. There were exactly 16 chairs, and not one of them had a place card for me. I stood there for a beat too long. Callista caught my eye and offered a sugary-laced explanation. "Oh, sorry, Brielle. We weren't sure you'd attend, so we kept it small." "Of course." I nodded slowly. "No worries." I turned, walked back to the hallway, and settled again onto the wooden floor with my plate. Someone passed by, their eyes lingering a second too long before moving on. They didn't offer me a seat. Nobody did. Across from me, just above the sideboard, hung a new version of the family portrait Mama had once cherished. Except now it was cropped. Strategically, my face was gone. And in its place, Ellison stood slightly closer to Callista, their shoulders touching. The lighting had been softened, the background blurred. It looked glossy, picture perfect. Just without me. I didn't eat much. The food tasted like cardboard. My heart felt heavy, but not in the way that begged for pity. It burned, not the kind of burn that explodes. No, this was slower, steady, focused. When the evening wound down, I gathered my things quietly, walked toward the foyer, and took a picture of the memorial board. Just one. I didn't post it, didn't send it. I simply saved it to my phone, tucked it away in a folder I'd labeled Truth. They wanted me gone, invisible, forgettable, but I wasn't going to let that happen. Not quietly, not anymore. And I was about to show them everything they tried to hide. The day after the memorial dinner, I woke early. I couldn't sleep much the night before. My mind kept turning over the same phrase, "They want me invisible." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there on the edge of my bed, letting the weight of what they'd done settle in. But deep down, something had shifted. And that something wasn't going back into silence. By mid-morning, I was at my kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm tea, scrolling through Facebook without much thought, just habit. That's when I saw it, tagged in a post by an old high school friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years but still shared random life updates with, was an article from a lifestyle blog. One of those modern Southern design sites full of velvet chairs, exposed beams, and carefully curated farmhouse chic. The title read, "Designing Legacy, the Home That Heals Generations." And there she was, Callista, framed in perfect lighting, smiling beside the living room fireplace, my fireplace. The one Mama and I had spent a week refinishing after the flood in 2012. The one with the old stonework that had taken 3 trips to get right. In the photo, Callista leaned one elbow on the mantel like she'd been born beside it. The caption beneath the image made my jaw clench. "We bought this fixer-upper 3 years ago and poured our souls into making it a home." I blinked, reread it. We bought it. They didn't buy anything. They were still living in that house rent-free because I let them. I read the article top to bottom. It went on about Callista's vision, how she rescued a decaying Southern gem and turned it into a space for family, healing, and tradition. There was even a photo of the dining room. Mama's antique table was gone, replaced by some sterile glass setup with chrome legs. The article didn't mention me, not once, not a footnote, not a "thanks to Brielle for the opportunity." I didn't exist. I took a screenshot, then another, saved the link, emailed it to myself with the subject line, evidence. Later that week, I made a quiet excuse to drop off a box of old winter coats at the house, stuff I figured Ellison might still use, and I didn't want to keep hoarding space. I knocked. Callista wasn't home. Ellison answered. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. "Hey," I said, holding the box. "Just dropping these off." He nodded. "Yeah, sure, thanks." No eye contact, no small talk. I stepped into the hallway and froze. Hanging on the wall just beside the coat closet was the family photo. The one Mama loved, Christmas 2013. Me, Ellison, her, and Daddy. Smiling. Except now it was different. My spot in the photo was blurred, literally blurred out, like someone had taken a digital brush and smeared my face into the background. It was subtle. If you hadn't seen the original, maybe you wouldn't notice. But I noticed. And right below it, taped to the wall, was a crayon drawing in a child's handwriting. My family, Mommy, Daddy, Grandma. That's it. No Auntie B, no me. I didn't say anything. I just nodded once and placed the coat box near the door. "I'll let you go," I said. Ellison didn't even try to stop me. Outside on the porch, I paused. I needed a breath, the kind that burns on the way down. Aunt Doreen was walking her dog down the sidewalk. She spotted me and waved. I waited for her to come closer. "Hey, sugar," she said, pulling her coat tighter. "Didn't expect to see you around here. I was just leaving something for Ellison." She glanced at the house, then leaned a little closer. "Can I ask you something, baby?" I nodded. "Did you really sell them the house? That's what Callista's been telling folks, that you gave it up, said it was too much for you to keep up with." My stomach dropped. "No," I said evenly. "I gave them a key. I never gave them the deed." Aunt Doreen sighed. "Thought so, just wanted you to hear it from someone. Folks around here are starting to ask questions." I thanked her, walked to my car, and sat behind the wheel without starting it. Then I opened my phone and created a new folder titled The Truth. Into it went every screenshot, every email, the deed, the article, and now a photo I'd taken of the altered family portrait just before I walked out. They were erasing me in layers, digitally, socially, emotionally, quietly, but deliberately. But what they didn't know was that I still held the negatives, the original deeds, the unfiltered photos, the memories they couldn't crop or filter or recaption. By sunset, I was back home. I pulled into my driveway, parked, and sat there for a while. I watched the orange sky fade into navy, the stars start to prick through the dark. Inside, I laid the documents out on my kitchen table and began organizing them. My mother always said, "When people don't give you room to speak, write your own script." So I did. That night, I didn't cry. I planned, because silence was no longer protection, and I wasn't letting them write me out. I had barely slept the night before. After archiving the photos and screenshots, my thoughts wouldn't stop looping. Everything felt calculated now. The public image Callista was building, the way she'd rewritten our family story without so much as a blink. And still, somewhere deep down, I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't all intentional. I let that hope die the following morning. I drove downtown to the county clerk's office in Savannah. It was a humid Wednesday, the kind where your skin sticks to the seatbelt and everything smells faintly like wet sidewalk and pine sap. I parked on the shaded side of the street and made my way inside. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't need a cheer squad. What I needed was proof. The clerk helped me pull old homeowner records tied to my mother's name and mine. I paid for certified copies of everything: deed, property tax filings, title verification, notarized affidavits from Mama's will. Each page was like a nail in the coffin of every lie Callista had been passing around town. As I stepped outside, folder in hand, I ran into Mr. Calvin, our old mailman. He was retired now, but still walked the neighborhood most mornings, chatting with neighbors like he used to when we were kids. "Well, look who's back in town," he said, tipping his cap. "You still fightin' for that house?" I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" He looked at me like I should already know. "Callista's been tellin' folks for years you gave it to them. Said it was too much for you after your mama passed. She even said you moved away and didn't want nothing to do with the family place." I felt my jaw tighten. "She said that to you?" He nodded. "At the 4th of July cookout, she was real confident about it too. Loud enough for half the street to hear." That was 3 summers ago. I gripped the folder tighter. "Thanks for letting me know." He gave a small nod and walked on. Back in my car, I turned the ignition but didn't drive. I just sat there, letting the engine hum while the weight of that revelation sank in. That evening, I went up into the attic of my apartment to find an old cedar chest I hadn't opened since Mama died. I knew what I was looking for. It took me a while: dusty boxes, folded quilts, the smell of mothballs and old paper. But when I found the worn, navy blue Bible with the floral bookmark, I opened it gently. Inside, tucked between Psalm 23 and a handwritten grocery list from years ago, was a note. Mama's handwriting, small and careful. "Brielle, if this house ever becomes noise instead of peace, protect it. It was built for shelter, not status." My hands trembled, not out of anger, but because for the first time in a long while, I felt seen, validated, like Mama knew this day would come, like she had left me a compass just in case I lost my way in the noise. I sat there with that note for a long while. No tears, just quiet. A clarity I hadn't had in weeks began to settle in my chest. Later that night, I began pulling every file I had. I laid them out across my dining table like a war map: utility bills in my name, tax forms addressed to me, probate filings listing me as sole beneficiary, insurance papers, maintenance receipts, anything that proved I had been the one holding it all together while Callista redecorated her lie. The next morning, I made an appointment with a local estate attorney, someone recommended by one of Mama's old church friends. Ms. Kerrigan was sharp, older, and didn't waste time. After reviewing everything, she said, "If the house is in your name and there's no legal transfer, then legally you're still the owner. End of story." I nodded slowly. "Then why do I feel like I'm the one trespassing?" She leaned forward. "Because people don't have to steal the deed to steal your belonging. All they need to do is act like you never mattered. Silence is a powerful weapon, Brielle." That hit harder than I expected. She handed the file back. "I'd suggest a formal notice. Document everything. Be precise. And don't say anything you wouldn't want read out loud in court." I left her office and drove straight home. By nightfall, I had typed out a letter, not some emotional vent, just facts, measured, firm, professional. I reviewed it twice, then emailed it to both Callista and Ellison, copying Kerrigan on the message. Subject: Notice of Intent. I will need access to the property by end of next week. I am formally requesting full documentation of any structural or interior changes made without consent, including receipts and before-after photos. Failure to comply will result in legal action. No threats, no dramatics, just the truth. And truth, this time, would not be ignored. The email had been sent. I triple-checked it before clicking send, knowing full well what it meant. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because my mind wouldn't stop working. Every second I sat in that quiet apartment, I could hear Mama's voice in the back of my head. Some lines, baby, you don't let people cross, not even family. The next morning, I left the house early. I didn't go to the house or the attorney's office. I needed a breath of fresh air that didn't smell like courtroom preparation, so I went to River Street. The antique shop at the corner had always been one of Mama's favorites. Sometimes we'd spend hours there just browsing, sipping sweet tea from to-go cups, running our fingers across old wood and dusty brass. I stepped inside, letting the little bell above the door announce me. The smell of old paper and worn leather filled the room. The woman behind the counter looked up. "Brielle Carter?" I blinked, surprised. "Yes?" She smiled. "Your family was in here not too long ago. Sold us a gorgeous lace wedding dress, real vintage, pearl buttons, long train. Belonged to your mother, I think." It felt like the air went out of the room. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Had your mother's initials stitched inside. CLC? Ring any bells?" My fingers tightened around the handle of my purse. "That was Maricel Carter, my mother." "Oh," she said, suddenly more reserved. "I assumed Callista had the right." I smiled tightly. She didn't. I left the shop, walked straight to my car, and sat there with the engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. It wasn't just a dress. That gown had been in our family for 3 generations. Mama wore it, her mother before her. I used to sneak into her closet and run my fingers down those tiny pearl buttons, imagining what her wedding day must have been like. Now it was gone, sold to a stranger. I didn't go home. Instead, I stopped at a coffee shop and opened my email. As I sipped from a cup that tasted like cardboard, a new message popped up from a former coworker, Michelle. Subject: Thought of you. Inside was a flyer. Digital, glossy, professional. The Anna Foundation presents Preserving Southern Heritage in honor of Maricel Carter. Location: Savannah Historical Society, Ballroom. Date: Saturday, 6 p.m. I stared at it for a full minute. Anna Foundation. That wasn't a family name. That was Callista's middle name. I scrolled down to read the mission statement. It praised modern Southern women reviving traditional family values and honoring matriarchs who built foundations. There was a quote from Callista beneath Mama's picture. "My mother-in-law taught me what resilience looks like. This foundation is my way of passing that torch." I nearly dropped the phone. That was my mother. My torch. Callista had taken her name, her story, her photo, and wrapped them in a fundraiser she didn't ask permission for. I picked up the phone and called Ellison. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey," he said, unsure. "Everything okay?" "Did you know she sold Mama's wedding dress?" I asked. Pause. "I thought maybe she donated it for the event." "She sold it, Ellison, to a shop downtown." He was quiet. "And the foundation, using Mama's name, did she get permission for that too?" "She's trying to honor her, Bree. I thought you'd appreciate that." "No," I said flatly. "She's monetizing her memory. She's using her name like a brand." "That's not honoring, that's exploitation." "I didn't know," he murmured. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Well, now you do." I hung up before he could respond. Back at home, I scanned everything I could. Ownership papers, archived emails, even Mama's handwritten notes. Then I sat down and wrote one final email. To Callista Carter, Ellison Carter. CC, Attorney Patricia Kerrigan. Subject, formal notice. Unauthorized use of family name and property. Body, Callista. Any further use of my family's name, image, or personal property, including likeness, photographs, heirlooms, or associated items, without my written consent will be pursued in civil court. You have until Monday at 5 p.m. EST to remove all references and cease any public-facing campaigns using the name or memory of Maris L. E. Carter. Please see attached. Copy of original deed. Probate records listing me as sole heir. Handwritten note from Maris L. Carter regarding property intent. Certified document of wedding dress appraisal and photo. This is your last informal notice. Brielle Carter. I hit send. There was no shaking in my hands this time. Some lines you don't cross. And some, when crossed, don't allow you back. But I always write back in ink. Friday morning, I sat across from Miss Kerrigan at her office, a place with more mahogany than warmth. The walls were lined with law books and case photos. It smelled like paper and old arguments. She slid a manila folder across her desk toward me and opened it slowly. They used this, she said, tapping the page, as evidence of implied transfer. Claimed you wrote it 2 years ago as a gesture to make the house theirs permanently. I leaned forward. The document inside was a scan of a note I'd once written on yellow-lined paper. A quick, informal message I'd left for Ellison when I was traveling, letting him know the water heater had been repaired and the place was his to use while I was away, except the version I was staring at now had an added sentence at the bottom. Consider this house yours, permanently. My breath caught. That's not my handwriting, I said, pointing. That sentence wasn't there. Kerrigan nodded. It's a clean scan, but the signature at the bottom was lifted from another document, a check endorsement, to be exact. We can verify that with forensic review, but it won't be cheap. I don't care what it costs, I said. I want it on record. Then we proceed. That afternoon, a courier arrived with a sealed envelope in hand and delivered it directly to the house. I stayed in my car across the street and watched from a distance. Through the open window, I heard the dogs bark. Callista opened the door, still wearing her silk robe and holding a mug of something overpriced. The courier handed her the envelope and asked for a signature. Her face changed as she skimmed the document. She wasn't surprised, just annoyed, the kind of irritation people get when they're forced to acknowledge they've been caught. A few minutes later, Ellison stepped outside. I watched them talk, Callista pacing, gesturing wildly, Ellison staring down at the paper like it had betrayed him. I imagined the moment he saw the photocopy of my mother's handwritten note attached to the packet with a single sticky note. The key you changed no longer matters. This house already knows who it belongs to. I didn't linger. That night, close to 11, I heard a knock at my apartment door. I knew it was him before I even looked through the peephole. Ellison stood there, still in his work uniform, face drawn, shoulders slouched like a boy being sent to apologize by a teacher. I opened the door. You want to come in? He nodded, eyes red. Just for a minute. I poured him a glass of water and set it on the coffee table. He didn't drink it. I thought we were building something real, he said, voice low. You were, I replied. But she was building it on ground that didn't belong to her. He rubbed his forehead. I didn't know about the forged letter. I believe you. He looked up, surprised. But that doesn't make this okay, I added. I don't know how to fix it. I sat across from him. You don't have to fix it. You just have to stop pretending it's not happening. He nodded slowly. She's not who I thought she was. That may be true, but I'm exactly who you knew I was. He stood after a while, still quiet. I didn't ask him to stay. The next morning, I returned to the house. Alone. I used my spare key. Not because I expected it to work, but because I wanted to hear it click. It didn't. The locks had been changed again, so I rang the bell. No one answered. I unlocked the side gate, walked into the backyard, and entered through the kitchen door. The house was quiet. Callista must have gone out. Ellison likely at work. I moved through each room slowly, deliberately. Sticky notes were everywhere. On the fridge, caterer confirmed, check gluten-free options. On the mirror, brand pitch Wetzel Heather Wed 2 p.m. On a cabinet, paint swatches, coastal gray versus driftwood beige. They'd renamed the home without ever speaking it aloud. I walked through the hallway to the front room. One by one, I peeled the sticky notes from the walls and crumpled them in my hand. I didn't rush. I didn't mutter a word, just removed them, each one a silent erasure of a narrative I never agreed to. I paused in the dining room. There on the table was a clipboard with plans for a photography shoot. Backyard reveal for Anna Living series, finalized setup by Thursday. Anna. Again. That name didn't belong here. Neither did this plan. I took a pen from my purse and scrawled on the bottom of the page, unauthorized use of property, likeness, or family story will result in immediate legal response. Then I walked to the coat closet, opened the cedar box Mama kept her recipe cards in, and pulled out the very last index card she wrote before her stroke. Lemon pound cake, her favorite. I pressed it flat in my palm, folded it into my coat pocket. I walked out of that house, my house, not as someone reclaiming something lost, but as someone who never relinquished it to begin with. They could change the locks all they wanted. They could paint over the walls, replace the furniture, blur out my photo. But they couldn't change what was written in the foundation, and they sure as hell couldn't erase what I was about to put down in ink. The ink on the legal motion hadn't dried before I was already back at the house, camera in hand, scanning every corner for what might be needed later in court. Ms. Kerrigan had given me a checklist, items to photograph, specific damage or alterations to document, and I followed it like scripture. The morning light cut through the shutters in sharp lines, casting shadows on hardwood floors that once echoed Mama's footsteps. I was halfway down the hall when I heard the side gate creak. Turning toward the sound, I found myself face to face with someone I hadn't seen in years, Mrs. Estelle. She used to work for Mama once a week. Cleaned, cooked sometimes, helped when Mama's knees got too stiff. She had a memory like a steel trap and a voice like warm linen. She looked surprised to see me. "Well, my lord, Brielle Carter, I thought you were long gone." "I'm still around," I said softly. "Just not always seen." Estelle stepped inside without asking. She looked around the hallway like someone visiting a gravesite that had been redecorated without permission. She walked over to the fireplace and ran her fingers across the new marble Callista had chosen. "Doesn't suit the house," she muttered. Then her gaze returned to me, sharper now. "I need to tell you something." I nodded, waiting. "A few months back," she began slowly, "Callista asked me something strange. She said, if something ever happened to Brielle, would it be easier to change the title of the house?" I stared at her. "She laughed after," Estelle added, eyes narrowing. "Like it was a joke, but it didn't feel like one. I never forgot it." A chill ran through me, not fear, but clarity, a confirmation of what I had already suspected but hadn't yet voiced out loud. "She said that out loud?" I asked, my tone as even as I could manage. "Clear as day," Estelle replied, "and with that same little smile she always wears when she's stirring a pot she ain't got no business near." "Thank you for telling me," I said, quietly. Estelle touched my arm. "You're your mama's child. Don't let that woman rewrite history." That evening, after I got home and sorted through the photos I'd taken, my phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number, but I knew the tone. Once she's legally out, we apply for homestead exemption. House becomes ours. Easy. It took me a second to realize who had sent it. Then a second message followed. Oops, wrong person. No follow-up, no apology, no call, just silence. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in one hand, and stared at the screen until it went dark. The arrogance, the assumption, the absolute boldness of planning my erasure, like I was some bump in her roadmap to ownership. I forwarded the message to Ms. Kerrigan immediately, tagging it with the subject, Intent to commit fraud, confirmed. The next morning, I met with her again. This isn't just civil anymore, she said, not even looking up from the document she was marking with highlighter. If that signature was forged and we have evidence of deliberate intent to deceive, this crosses into criminal territory. I didn't flinch. Then we go there, she paused. Are you sure? Once this goes into court record, there's no turning back. I exhaled slowly. She tried to delete me from the house. Let's show her how deletion works, legally. Later that afternoon, I returned to the house. This time, I didn't just mail the documents or rely on a third-party courier. I walked in. Callista was in the living room, seated cross-legged on the new cream sofa, scrolling through her tablet like nothing in the world was about to shift beneath her feet. Ellison stood by the stairs, holding a coffee mug he wasn't drinking. I stepped forward, folder in hand. She glanced up. Didn't expect to see you here. I figured, I said calmly. I set the folder on the coffee table and looked at both of them. Inside was the legal motion, an affidavit from Estelle, a record of Callista's mistaken text, and the confirmation that the deed had never been transferred, notarized, or consented. This ends, I said, locking eyes with her. Today, Callista raised her chin. You're bluffing. No, I said, voice steady. You're trespassing. Ellison's hand twitched on the mug. He looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw guilt instead of avoidance. You forged my handwriting, you misrepresented my family's story, and you told a woman who wiped our mama's windows that my disappearance might make this easier for you. Callista opened her mouth to speak. I held up a hand. I've been polite. I've been quiet. I've been every Southern value they try to instill in little girls who grow up without raising their voice. I leaned forward. But I'm not quiet anymore. The room was still. You have 48 hours to begin vacating. If I see your face in this house past that deadline, I will bring the sheriff, a news crew, and every single legal tool I have, and I will not stop. Callista looked like she wanted to spit venom, but instead, she stood up and walked out of the room. Ellison didn't move. I turned without another word, walked to the door, and stepped back into the sunlight. The storm had hit, but I wasn't the one standing in the rain anymore. And when the door opened again, it wasn't mine they slammed shut. I stood on the porch, folder in hand, a solid oak presence behind me, Ms. Kerrigan, and two Savannah officers in uniform to my left. The early afternoon sun cast long shadows across the front steps, and even the wind seemed to pause. Callista opened the door with the same polished smirk she'd worn since the first time she ever walked into Mama's house, calling it quaint. Except now, her smile was tight, calculated, like someone who knew exactly how thin the ice was beneath her heels but still planned to pretend it was solid. "You're trespassing," she said before I could speak. Her voice was louder than necessary, projecting toward the neighbors. I didn't flinch. Neither did Kerrigan. One of the officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint, but we're here to verify ownership of the property. If you don't mind—" "Oh, I do mind," Callista cut in. "This is my home. That woman," she jabbed a finger toward me, has been harassing us for weeks. My husband and I. Kerrigan lifted the folder, calm and composed. We'd like to present documentation that disputes that claim. The officer nodded. Let's see what you've got. We moved into the living room. Callista stormed toward the kitchen, muttering under her breath. Ellison appeared at the top of the stairs, eyes hollow. He didn't say a word, just leaned against the railing like someone watching a courtroom drama unfold in his own home. I laid out the documents on the dining table. Original deed, notarized in 2004 under my name. Mama's will. Property tax receipts paid in full for the past 18 years. And a verification letter from the county clerk's office. The officer scanned each page, lips pursed. Then, in a voice clear and direct, he read aloud. Owner of record, Brielle Carter, effective since July 2004. The silence in the room was instant and violent. Callista, who'd returned from the kitchen, froze. That's not possible, she said, stepping back like the words had hit her. The second officer looked up. Ma'am, your name is nowhere on this paperwork. There's no lease, no title transfer, no recorded deed in your name or your husband's. But she gave it to us, Callista said, voice tightening. She let us live here. She said we could make it ours. Ellison spoke then, voice low. She didn't. We just acted like she did. The officers turned to me. Do you want us to begin removal proceedings today, Miss Carter? I looked at Callista, then at Ellison. He couldn't meet my eyes. No, I said. They have 72 hours. After that, the locks change, and everything else does too. Kerrigan packed the documents, handed copies to the officers, and nodded to me. The tension had drained just enough to breathe again, but my chest still felt like a stone rested on it. Callista stared at me, jaw clenched. You always wanted to play the victim. You never did like sharing. I stepped toward her, not close, but close enough for her to hear me without pretending not to. You didn't just take space. You tried to erase a legacy. Her face flickered. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. I turned away, stepping outside, folder still tucked under my arm. As I reached the porch steps, a breeze rustled through the trees Mama planted when I was 12. I remembered helping her dig the holes in the Georgia heat, both of us sweaty and tired, but laughing. Back then, it had felt like we were planting something that would outlast both of us. Now, I realized I didn't look back when I closed the gate behind me, because I wasn't walking away anymore. I was walking forward. You tried to erase a legacy. That line replayed in my mind more times than I could count in the weeks that followed. 3 Fridays after the officers left with copies of the deed still fresh in their folders, the house stood quiet. There were no slamming car doors, no voices filtered through open windows, no patio lights left on overnight, just the gentle hush of a home exhaling, like it had been holding its breath too. Callista and Ellison were gone. No court battle, no press release, no last-ditch Instagram post full of vague quotes about letting go or moving forward. Just silence. And for once, silence felt holy. I walked back in through the front door the following Monday, key in hand, no pushback. The smell was different, less lavender and lemon oil, more wood and memory. I didn't rush to clean. I didn't redecorate. I just stood in the foyer for a long time, touching the walls like they were skin. Room by room, I reclaimed the space, not by stripping it bare, but by placing things back with intention. In the kitchen, I hung Mama's apron on the hook behind the pantry door. In the den, I set her old recipe box back where it used to live, next to the radio we always left on low volume. I found the quilt she kept on the back of her favorite armchair, folded neatly in a bin Callista had labeled, "Donate." I unfolded it, shook off the dust, and laid it across the foot of the couch like a gentle declaration. This wasn't about design, it was about direction, about rerouting what someone else had tried to sever. The neighbors waved when they saw me on the porch again. A few brought small things, baskets of muffins, sprigs of rosemary, a pie wrapped in plastic that had likely come from the store but was offered with love. I accepted every one. Evenings were the hardest. The quiet was so complete I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel like it had something to say. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch, just rocking, watching the neighborhood drift by. It wasn't grief anymore, it was restoration. Slow, deliberate restoration. The letter from Ellison arrived in a plain envelope with no return address, just my name, in his handwriting. Inside was a single page. I was wrong. I saw her vision so clearly. I ignored your truth. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know. I see it now. I see you. Ellison, I didn't cry. I didn't burn the letter. I folded it and placed it inside Mama's Bible, in the very spot where she'd once left a note for me. Some bridges don't have to burn. Some just need to be left alone. Sunday mornings became my ritual. I'd wake early, tie on that apron, and bake Mama's sweet bread. The smell filled the house in a way that made time fold in on itself. By 10, the porch would fill with visits. Miss Doreen with her gossip, young Cassie from next door with a flower from her mother's garden, a few curious glances from folks who used to walk past without a word. One afternoon, while sweeping the steps, I saw a familiar sedan slow at the stop sign. The window rolled down just a bit. Ellison, we locked eyes, just for a second. He gave a small nod. I nodded back. And then he drove on. That was enough. That evening, as dusk settled and the sky turned the soft color of cotton, I sat in Mama's old armchair, the quilt warm on my lap, and thought about everything this house had held, and everything it would hold again. I looked around, at the furniture that had come home, the walls free of curated images, the quiet no longer haunted but whole. And I knew, this house isn't just mine because of paper. It's mine because I remembered. I stood still when they tried to erase me. And now, when people walk through that door, they know whose story it carries. Sometimes, the loudest justice is delivered in silence, through a deed, a truth, a name that refuses to be erased. This story isn't just about a house. It's about reclaiming your voice when others try to rewrite your life. Have you ever been pushed out of something that was rightfully yours? What did you do? If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. More real-life revenge stories and family reckonings are coming your way.